And hello, I'm back again. This video is a direct follow-up to my previous video, my first video. I talked about Melting Stones by Tamora Pierce, which is my least favorite book by her. It's still a very good book. I do recommend it if you're interested in just diving into a series. It would be the end of the series. However, it stands on its own and you can enjoy it without reading any other book in the series. This video, I'm going to talk more about the other two books in relation to Melting Stone. So some more context. Tamora Pierce is a young adult, primarily a young adult fantasy author, published most of her books between the 1980s through the 2010s. In the first video I mentioned I didn't know exactly how many books she had published. So I've checked since then. If you look at Wikipedia, it includes short stories and essays and publications that aren't related to or that are beyond the Emmeline series and the Tortall series, which are primarily what I've read and reread and am most familiar with and plan to be talking about. So we're talking basically 21 and 11, about 32 published works that I'm most familiar with, minus one. There's a book in the Tortall series, her most recent published book, I think, 2018, and I haven't read that one. That's the Numair book. I picked it up at one point at the store and decided not to buy it. And that's all I can say about that at this point. But we're not here to talk about all those other books. We're here to talk about these three standalone books, the Circle Reforged collection. That is The Will of the Empress, that was published first. And I read first. Here it is. I think around here you can see it nicely in the frame. I hate this cover. I'm going to come back to talking about why I hate this cover another time. The Will of the Empress. Of these three books, I would have to say this is still my favorite, but it's not really a fair comparison. This single novel is the sort of capstone of the prior two quartets. The Circle of Magic quartet, you have Sandri's book, Triss's book, Daja's book, Briar's book. These four foster siblings, young mages, 10 and 11 years old, discovering their magic. You're learning and growing with them as you read the book. The second quartet, the Circle opens. They're all about 14 years old. They all acquire a student and go through a powerful magical growing, either a magical battle or a psychological, psycho-thriller kind of battle, and they get through it on their own, wishing that they had their siblings with them, but managing. And in this book, 17, 18 years old, they all finally come back together to see how they've grown and figure out how to reforge their circle together. Love it. Great scenes. Characters grow. You grow as a reader with them. Capstone. In the previous video, what I established my problem mainly with this is the dialing back of the maturity. That Melting Stones was published after The Will of the Empress. It's Evie, who's Briar's student, who's 14 as opposed to 18 with the previous characters. So it's just the maturity level just got dialed back. There's nothing wrong with this story. It just was growing in the opposite direction of where I was growing. I realized when I was looking at these two, these were definitely probably written, drafted together, meant to be published together. The sort of font style that they have for their titles matches. This book took a readership away from the original quartet of the Circle series. A few years later, you have Battle Magic. This goes back in time a couple of years. Briar, his teacher Rosethorn, his student Evie. So when you read The Will of the Empress and that comes out, Sweet Briar has now clearly got PTSD from this war that you're reading about and you're getting hints about, but you don't really know what happened. And at the end of the book, there's two spoilers. I didn't say this earlier. Again, I forgot. Sorry. If you got this far, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I didn't say any of that. Thank you for watching this. Hi, hello. Welcome to this channel and this crazy talking blah, blah, blah about Tamora Pierce. Will of the Empress, Briar and his teacher and his student, they're in this situation, this war. These are the details that were given. We get to the end of the will of the Empress, and some of his specific experiences are relevant to how they get through the conflict at the end of the will of the Empress. Spoiler, specifically, Imperial mages used sleep spells to get the drop on them during the war. So at the end of this book, when a different Imperial mage is trying to use sleep spells, he's got the experience to recognize it, and he's got the keep awake potion to take a sniff and crunch through the sleep spell so it doesn't work on him, and they get through the rest of the plot. So that's an event in the Will of the Empress. Keep going in the Will of the Empress, you get to the end of it, there's this meditative dream space, and Briar explains that they were locked up for a little while during the war, and to kind of keep from going crazy, he created this peaceful mental space. Because of the nature of their magic, he is able to share it with his sisters. End of the story. Great, love it. Melting Stones, read that. More details, little traumas that Rosethorn and Evie are coping with and healing from. Nothing there contradicts anything that Briar said in The Will of the Empress. Luvo is a mountain spirit that they met and who is choosing to continue to travel with Evie. He is briefly mentioned by Briar. He's briefly given an origin by Briar. The further detail that he's given in Melting Stone doesn't contradict anything that Briar said. Then comes battle magic. Those two specific things that I just said are contradicted by the events of battle magic. This doesn't break the story. Like with Melting Stones, if you just pick this up and just read it, you don't need to read anything else in this series to have a good read, to understand the characters, to understand what's happening, to appreciate the world that's built here. Most likely, if you pick this up and read it by itself, you'll want to know more about Briar and his sisters, and you'll want to pick up other books in this series. When I reread it this year, instead of reading in the publication order, Will of the Empress, Melting Stones, Battle Magic, I read it in chronological order with Battle Magic first. So even though I remembered the details, I didn't really remember the details. So it was an enjoyable experience with this. I devoured this book. Instead of reading it as I did the first time, going, that's not what was in the other book. Instead, I read this as, this is the account of the war and how they experienced it. And then when I read the other books, I was like, wait, that's not what happened in this book. But because I read this one first, I don't know, the roots of these ones were in place. And so in my first video, I started to say about, I don't know how to say this without overcomplicating it, but then I didn't say what it was that I didn't want to overcomplicate. There's kind of an implication between Melting Stones and The Will of the Empress about the duration and brutality of this war that they experience. What's in this book is brutal, and it's certainly long enough. I mean, any war is too long, really. I feel like, and this is all just my feeling, there's no interviews, there's no research, none of that. This is just my feeling that Tamora Pierce probably had something more graphic drafted that she pulled from when she was writing The Will of the Empress and Melting Stones. And then probably the readership or somebody else wanted to know what happened to Briar and everyone. But what she had written, it's my assumption that some sort of editorial decision-making was involved to make it more young adult, less new adult or graphic. And that's just my opinion. That's just my assumption. That's just a feeling that I have. This book brought me to tears 3 times. And the thing is, the first time, you know it's coming if you've read the other books first, and it still gets you. And then, spoilers, character death, false character death, spoilers. Sorry. No, none of the main characters die, other secondary characters die. Evie is thought to be dead at one point. you as the reader know the whole time that she is not dead. Even so, when Briar is told that she is dead, and then when Rosethorn is told that she is dead, both scenes get you because it's real for them. I don't know. Tamora Pierce is a really good writer, even though apparently details that aren't perfect grind my subconscious gears, and I would be sorry for that, except I'm not sorry for that because it doesn't bother anyone but me. I think that's all I have to say about these 3 books today. That I feel like this got dialed back, that reading them chronologically is advisable over reading them in publication order. So if you're taking on Tamora Pierce and you're taking on the Circle of Magic series, read Battle Magic before you read The Will of the Empress. Go ahead and subscribe if you're interested in more Tamora Pierce. Someday I'll talk about my writing, so you can subscribe if you want to learn about that. And like if this rambling was to your liking. Comment if you want to ask anything about Tamora Pierce, or let me know about your experiences with Tamora Pierce. If you've read these books, if you will read these books. I'm sure that I talk too fast. Go ahead and tell me which part you didn't understand because of how fast I talked. And thank you for being here.